So in this second week of Season 2 of Midnight, there is a very good way to earn a lot of loot very quickly, and this method is not only just going to be giving you a lot of loot, but it's going to be able to give you some of the best items in the game. And this is primarily going to be rewarding champion track gear, but you will also be getting a hero track piece of gear. And this is very easy and fast. It only takes about 30 minutes total, maybe a little bit longer if your group isn't the best, but it takes that long and you have a bunch of different chances of loot. And no matter what character you're on, no matter how geared your level 90 is, you can go do this as well. And one of the best parts about this is the first time doing this content that you can get rewarded with a piece of tier. So you could get a tier set token. And the reason you can do this week is because it's Wrath of the Lich King time walking, and there's a few things we're going to add together to get a ridiculous amount of loot. Now, I'm just going to go through a little checklist of things you should be doing when going through this 30-minute farm. The first thing is you're going to go to either your adventurer journal or to this Silver Moon weekly quest pickup area, and there's a weekly quest you're going to pick up there for an objective to either defeat 5 time walking raid bosses or complete 5 time walking dungeons. This is going to get completed through what we're doing, and that chest is going to be probably the most important, because while that chest is going to reward you with a champion track piece of gear, it can also be any piece of gear from the newest raid. So that means if you say get a piece of gear from the final boss of the new raid, then that item will be higher up on the champion track. I'm pretty sure the final boss is like 4 out of 6, but if you get any of the super rare items, which you can, those will be 6 out of 6 champion track. And this also means you can get all of the best trinkets in the game from the raid, which even on champion track, these best in slot trinkets are probably going to be better than most of the hero track you can get, and probably going to be up there with a lot of the myth track trinkets, even some of the good ones from like Mythic Plus. But to add on top of that, now you can also get any of the tier piece tokens. So if you go and look through the adventurer journal for all of these raid bosses, all of them drop tier pieces as tokens. So say from a specific boss, it'll drop a tier piece for your head slot or your chest slot. And if I'm not mistaken, there are still the tokens for the Vita boss that you can just turn into any tier piece you want, but it is very nice that with this time walking, they added the ability to get those tier piece tokens through this chest as well. And I can't confirm this yet, but from everything I've seen so far, from people just reporting about this and me doing this run on a bunch of characters, it seems like the tier piece tokens drop more often. Either that or just because there are tier piece tokens for every class on a lot of the bosses in the raid, it may just be getting any piece of tier has a higher chance in getting like most other pieces of loot. So it might be that, but it does seem like you have a pretty good chance to get a tier piece from this one chest from this one weekly quest. Now, getting your tier set is actually very, very important, not only because they're very strong, but because once you get your 4 set on that character, you then get the achievement that allows you to get more catalyst charges through any endgame content. So through doing delves, through doing Mythic Plus, or defeating raid bosses, you can now get more catalyst charges, and you could technically get an infinite amount of them. So once you get that 4 set, no matter if it's like all veteran pieces or not, you can then just go do whatever content you're doing, and you'll constantly be farming up more catalyst charges to be able to catalyze that more high-end gear you want to. So more opportunities to get tier set this early on in the season is very, very important. And we got a little sidetracked, but that's part 1. Part 2 is go to the Wrath of the Lich King Dalaran version, so the one in Crystal Song Forest. There's going to be a quest giver there right next to the time walking vendor right in the middle of Dalaran. They will have a quest to go defeat Yogg-Saron, the final boss of Ulduar, and they will be giving you a box that can give you a hero track piece of gear. Now, why this box can be less important than the other box we went over that only gives you champion track is because this hero track piece of gear is only from Ulduar raid drops. So this isn't from the current raid, it's only drops from Ulduar. Now, there are drops in there that can be very good. I know some of the trinkets are pretty good, and then obviously any piece of gear just has different stat weights on it. So for instance, on one of my paladins, I got a shield that legitimately was best in slot stats for that character, and its hero track as well. So until I either get myth track out of my vault, do a mythic raid boss, which would obviously be the hardest, or use a reroll token on a +10 mythic dungeon, unless I do one of those things, I'm not going to be upgrading the shield at any point. So you can just get very, very good loot out of that, but I do think it's a much higher chance to get something that's really good out of that first box because it's all the newest raid loot that can also be a tier piece token. So that's number 2. And then at number 3, you're going to want to go into your group finder and look under Legacy Raid, and people will be setting up groups for Ulduar. Now, a lot of people will just be doing skips where they only go and do the last boss. I would not recommend doing this unless the only thing you care about is the box that gives you a hero track piece of gear from Ulduar loot. But I think the best loot is from the other box. So what I would recommend to do is to look up any of the groups that are doing full clears of Ulduar, which will only take like 30 to 35 minutes unless your group is super slow. So then you're going to go through, you're going to defeat all of the bosses, and once you're completed with that, both of the quests we had you pick up will be completed. So you will go turn in the quest in Dalaran, the Wrath of the Lich King Dalaran. That will give you the box to give you the hero track piece of gear. Then go back to Silvermoon, turn in that quest, and that will give you the box of champion track gear, but that gear will be from the new raid. And you're going to be done with this farm at that point. But while you're doing the raid, you will get a lot of opportunities at gear because every single boss in Ulduar Time Walking drops champion track pieces of gear. But not only will you be able to have a chance to get one champion track piece of gear from these bosses, for most of these bosses, if your group does it correctly, you will have 2 chances. Because if you don't know, back in Wrath of the Lich King, Ulduar was the first raid that was added that technically had heroic mode, and even more specifically, you could do a specific mechanic on most of the bosses in the raid that would activate their hard mode. And if you defeat them in this hard mode state, it spawns 2 chests after you defeat them, and when you loot both of those chests, both of them give you a chance for a champion track piece of loot. So you could go defeat one of these bosses if your raid did the heroic version of it, and you could get 2 pieces of loot. And there are 13 bosses in this raid for the time walking version, and not everyone has the heroic option for it, but most of them do. So you'll be having like 20 plus chances at champion track pieces of loot, depending on if your group actually does the mechanics that turns these fights into heroic versions of themselves. Now, in all the runs I've done, some of the fights people just don't do it. Like a bunch of the times you'll get down to Mimiron and people will just pull the boss before you can click the red button. You have the council fight where the boss you have to defeat last to do the heroic mode version of it has the least health, so people just cleave that one down first every time. A lot of the bosses, it's very easy to turn them into the heroic mode, so you'll still probably get around 20 chances at loot from just doing a normal run of Ulduar Time Walking. So if you add all of that up, you'll have 20 plus chances at loot. You will then have your guaranteed piece of champion track loot from the new raid, and then you will have your guaranteed piece of heroic track loot from the Ulduar raid specifically. So that is a lot of possible loot, some new ways to get tier sets, and all in all, this is legitimately the fastest loot you can get for champion track specifically out of any place in the game. Nothing even comes relatively close to the amount of loot you could potentially be getting, because also every single one of these bosses, even when you're not counting in looting the 2 chests, so you have 2 chances to get champion track loot, even not counting that, these Ulduar bosses drop so many pieces of loot for just a full raid. So you have a very, very good chance of be getting loot. In fact, I think the average is like 3 or 4 pieces of loot out of this. And if you're really looking for loot and say you're on like an alt character, you can just whisper people and ask them if they need that piece of loot. A lot of my characters are already geared past this, so anytime I was getting loot and someone would whisper me, I would just trade them that loot. If someone has a piece of gear higher item level than the loot they get in this, they can freely trade any loot they get, and a lot of people will just trade this loot because you can't even really disenchant it for some additional gold because it just gives you the Wrath of the Lich King enchanting material that's worth literally nothing. So a lot of people will just give you the loot they don't need if you asked if they need it. Now, a thing to note is that sadly, this is giving no great vault progression right now. Now, I read previously that time walking raids would give you dungeon great vault progression, but right now it's not giving raid. So just keep in mind, you're not going to be filling up your great vault doing this either, but it's still very much worth it. And unless you're like full myth track or something, which basically nobody is, this is probably going to be worthwhile for like 99% of the player base. And especially if you have some new level 90s, or if you have some characters you want to level up and get to 90, I would definitely recommend doing it this week, because what you can legitimately do is go level up a character through time walking dungeons, which is one of the fastest ways to level, and then you go pick up your weeklies and do this Ulduar raid, which is very easy. That's something I forgot to mention. The scaling of this raid right now is so easy that bosses are dying in like 10 seconds. So it's legitimately face roll no matter what you're bringing. Your comp for the raid doesn't matter. How geared people are doesn't matter. Just go in there, every boss will fall over. So you could bring in a newly dinged level 90 character and have a ton of chances at pretty decent loot. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.